Hey, everyone, and welcome to Building with Vitality, the podcast that's all about helping you live your best life.
And we're your hosts, Nikki and Paige. We're going to give you all the tools to help build a life that's full of vitality. Let's dive in.
We are here on Building with Vitality with our friends, Henry and Terrin. And I met Henry and Terrin a little while ago, and I was just so impressed with you guys, your energy, everything about you. So as we were kind of talking, I remember Henry asking me, so what are you interested in? And I said, well, I love, fitness, health, human behavior. And instantly he lit up and he was like, oh my gosh, you have to meet my wife, Terrin. We're so into that. And so as we kind of dove in, they had been studying and are these experts on masculine and feminine energy, as well as a bunch of other things.
Yeah, like Henry, you've been in human behavior for 25 years?
26, yeah.
26 years? Oh my gosh.
26 years, 3 months, and 4 days. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
So yeah, this episode, we want to just focus a lot on building ourselves, especially with the masculine, feminine energy, self-love, and then how that translates over into our relationships.
Yeah, both with your spouse and with even friendships as well.
Yeah.
So it's a lot to unpack.
Let's do it.
I'm like, how much time do we have?
I know.
Yeah, this is a series 1 of 5, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll have to be.
So I think for a lot of our listeners who want to improve their relationship themselves, they don't even know where to start, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you could give your best piece of advice to those people who are kind of like, I want to improve, but I don't even know. There's so many books, so many resources. What would be kind of your first piece of advice of where should they even start?
Yeah. Why don't you go first?
All right. To me, you got to start with truth, loving truth. You got to have loving self-awareness. If you don't really want to be honest with where you are, you can't discover where you want to go, right? Mm-hmm. If I had a GPS system and I just put some random city, I'm going to have the wrong directions when I go where I want to go, right? And I think a lot of us are really afraid to say where we are because we don't really, we're comfortable.
Right.
Right? But the comfort zone isn't really ever comfortable. Mm-hmm. No one's ever really comfortable in their comfort zone. So for me, it's like, we have to be lovingly honest. And loving is the key because a lot of times we're honest. We're like, oh my gosh, life is doomed. It's like, no, you can change. That's the best part about it. So to me, truth and love are what sets you free. And if you're not going to fully be honest with yourself, we always say, most people tell themselves enough truth to be uncomfortable, but not enough truth to be free.
Whoa.
I love that.
So
that's insane.
Yeah.
Pass the mic.
That's one of my favorite
Terrin.
quotes, yeah. Well, first off, before I even say anything, when we met, I have to tell everyone who's listening, if you haven't been able to meet these two beautiful women, it is like my greatest honor and pleasure to be friends with these two. And they are just as sweet and kind and amazing and knowledgeable and smart and beautiful, in person as they are on this podcast. So just have to throw that out there because I love you guys. Amen.
Right back at you guys. Seriously, the feeling is mutual, very mutual.
We just love you. But yeah, no, I think going along with what Henry said is it's always like having that awareness to identify where you're at, but being really honest. Because so many people be like, oh, I am feminine. I am in my feminine. Where in reality, it's femininity or stepping into your feminine is so much more than what you wear, more than high heels or makeup. It's deeper and it's unique to every specific woman, and masculinity is unique to every man, right? And we always say, we've worked with a lot of couples, and the number one key to a successful relationship is polarity and understanding the masculine feminine dynamic. And any of the couples that we've seen struggling, it really boils down to polarity. It's a depolarized relationship. And
what does that mean?
Yes.
Oh, yes. So I guess a simple way would be to first define what is masculine, what is feminine.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I'll take the feminine and I'll let Henry kind of describe.
I'll take the masculine.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think that's perfect. That's a perfect break.
Yeah, I love it. It's really fun to do events and stuff with Henry because having the masculine perspective is really, really amazing. But the feminine, energetically, the masculine feminine dynamic is really just to create the harmony and alignment within yourself as well as within a relationship. It's the energy in which you thrive and you grow within relationships. So feminine energy is very much the compassionate, nurturing, soft side. Femininity, or the feminine energy, really is attached to and connected to emotion and your body. The feminine is really, one of my favorite analogies even though I'm going to talk about the masculine here for a second, but is relating the masculine and feminine to a glass of water. And so which I think I've mentioned this
I love this analogy,
too.
but please, I love hearing you say it.
Yeah. So you can think of the masculine and feminine as a glass of water. So the glass itself represents the masculine, which is the structure. It's the safety. It's the certainty. And what does it do? It holds the water, which is the feminine. And the feminine is very free-flowing and beautiful and magnificent, similar to the ocean. And it can also be chaotic. You can think of it as the feminine in chaos of her emotion, right? But it's still held in the safety and container of the glass, which is the masculine. And so the feminine is very much just about being. You know, the masculine is about doing, but the feminine is about who am I being? Who am I? And softening into that and letting go of the control of things in life and just going with the flow. You think of a river going through in it, and the water goes around the rocks and is guided by the shoreline. So that's kind of a description of the feminine. But
And it's really important to note that all of us have both masculine and feminine.
Yes.
Right? So the integration process isn't just in our relationship, but it's within myself.
Yep.
You know, I have this like masculine side and I have a feminine side. And the goal is to integrate them to where I can show up the way I need to when I want to.
Yeah.
Right? And vice versa. But we all have a core energy and leading energy because we can dive into
know,
so
that's
much
awesome.
depth of
And
this. Like,
one of the deeper questions I do want to address after is because I'm struggling with this. When Terrin's in her feminine and you're in your masculine, things are probably great. But what happens if you need to go into your
100%.
feminine? What does Terrin do? Because that's where
I can't
my
wait to
mind
talk about that.
goes into
Yeah.
chaos.
yeah, we
where
have
I'm
a
like,
funny story about that too.
Okay.
If you want to tell it, I'm like, woo. Sometimes when I'm about to tell a story, I'm like, all right. You know, as we talk about the feminine, I just want to address this with the masculine. You could put the masculine down into 3 words. And you need all 3 of these things or else they don't work. It's power, love, and presence. You know, I can have power without love and the feminine won't feel safe. Right? Because you guys, we're going to layer the heck out of this
I know.
episode.
Layer it.
And you're
Yes.
probably going to want to. So but let me just pause on that for a second because the feminine needs 3 things. And in order to provide that safety for her, the feminine needs safety. They need to feel seen. They need to feel understood. And they need to feel safe. Feel seen, feel understood, and feel safe. Right? So if the masculine's power, love, and presence will help them feel seen and understood.
yes.
Right? Presence isn't in my head. I'm not stuck in the future in a fear-based response or stuck in my trigger in the past-based response. I'm here. Right? Power, you want to have something that we call meekness. Meekness is power under control. Right? It's like they call it a sheathed sword. Like you have a sword and you could use it if you want to. Right? That's going to make them feel safe. Like if I'm walking down an alley or if I need emotional safety, you have power, but you have it under control. Right? And the key of all of it is love. Right? There has to be love.
And I think that sometimes people misinterpret power for control.
100%.
So can you talk a little bit about how sometimes that kind of goes more into the toxic masculinity
100%.
because there's a big difference
Yeah.
between the healthy masculinity and the toxic
Yeah.
masculinity.
Yeah, so the opposite, if you think about this, you can't be living in fear and be truly masculine. Like, I mean like a fear-based living, right? I'm going to control you. You're living out of fear. How the hell am I supposed to feel safe if you're operating in this like safe? If you're strong, you're centered, you don't need to control anybody. Right? And there's a level, like when you see someone that tries to be aggressive men or aggressive people are afraid. Because aggression means my opinion matters and yours doesn't.
So they need to heal, essentially.
100%. You know? And so you have on one spectrum, you have passive, on the other spectrum, you have aggressive. Right? Assertive is what you really want. This is my opinion. What do you think? Because it's a partnership.
Right.
If I'm secure, I could hear you.
Yeah.
If I'm secure, I don't need to control you.
But what do people do if they don't know if they're secure? So if they do have an anger issue and there's some sort of issues in the relationship, like how do they even know what to do?
I'll say one thing and I'll pass it to Terrin. You know, they say every form of communication is a cry for help or an act of love.
Wow, did we have like 4 bomb drops already?
We did.
That's kind of what happens with this guy right
So
here. Yeah.
if someone's in anger, their nervous system is saying, I'm afraid, I have to defend, I'm in fight mode.
Yeah.
So they're in fear. They don't feel safe. And if you understand trauma and you understand the nervous system, which we dive into, if someone's angry, I'm just like, oh, they're. It sounds weird, but they're crying out for help.
100%. Yeah.
And I could have compassion and boundaries. You have to have both. Mm-hmm. That's a whole conversation.
What's the phrase? Just a couple weeks ago, we went to one of your events, and it was all about fear mindset and kind of the subconscious. And you said emotions are not dictators, but messengers.
Yeah, emotions are messengers. Yeah, not dictators. Yeah. You're supposed to have emotions. They're not supposed to have you. Mm-hmm. Right, and so that's why we're gonna feel angry. I get angry. Right. I get all emotions. Mm-hmm. All emotions are welcome. Mm-hmm. It's just, am I in my emotions or am I with my emotions?
Oh, that's what you said at the event.
Am I having my emotions or are my emotions having me? Am I dictated by my emotions or do I understand they're a messenger to bring me back home? Because emotions can lead you to freedom or emotions can put you in bondage.
Mm-hmm. So, and that I think goes back to what you said at the very, very beginning is that loving self-awareness where when you feel an emotion, I think a lot of times what a lot of people learn at a young age is they either sweep them underneath the rug because they learn that those emotions are bad. Mm-hmm. And so they just numb themselves with everything under the sun, right? Disassociating into work or achievement or food or drugs or whatever that looks like. And so to have compassion on yourself of, hey, this behavior, or then if they're, reacting in some way, this behavior in a loving way has served me. Like it had a purpose, but now this no longer serves me and I need to figure out a healthy way to deal with that. And so I think in my mind, that's kind of what loving self-awareness looks like, right? Of using that emotion when I feel angry, don't sweep it underneath the rug, don't turn to whatever I used to turn to, but look at that and try and understand, okay, why am I feeling angry? Mm-hmm. Where is this coming from?
Yeah. And well, from a trauma perspective, it's really neat to have that compassionate approach because, we learn all these things from a young age. Like even with masculine and feminine dynamic, the first experience that we have with the feminine energy is our mother. The first experience that we have with masculine energy is from our father. And all of these behaviors that you're talking about, there's something that's called an adaptive behavior. Mm-hmm. And it's really just your nervous system's way of trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And it's what you've learned and what your nervous system has become accustomed to and it's familiar. And so it's like, oh, this might mean bad. You get hurt in a relationship, but no, I don't want to open myself because that means I get hurt. So that's where this wall goes up and you stay in your masculine as a woman. So there's a lot of different things from a nervous system and trauma perspective. But when you're talking about emotion and pushing them away, it's kind of like, you think of a ball that you push down in a swimming pool and you push it down just a little bit and it pops up just a little bit, right? Yeah. That's the emotions. But if you take that ball and you push it down to the bottom of the pool, what happens is it shoots up. And that's exactly what happens with these emotions.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to do the sound effect. I'm like a little ball. I was like, sorry. Okay, sorry.
No, you're so good.
That was a great sound effect. Thank you.
I know. And so when we don't have that loving, compassionate approach, if we try to push it away, you think of like a child. Mm-hmm. My kids are out in the foyer. If my child came to me and they were upset and they were trying to tell me something and I just push them away, do you think they're going to get louder or quieter? But if I get down on her level and I say, I'm here, my darling, what do you need? I got you. You're safe. Mm-hmm. Is she going to get louder or quieter? She's going to know that she's safe and that we've got her. So it's the same thing with your emotions, with trauma. And that relates into the masculine feminine dynamic of you creating your own safety. That's what happens with women and why they operate in their masculine is I don't feel safe, so I'm going to create my own safety within and step into my masculine energy is what happens. So.
But tapping into your masculine energy as a female is still really good and powerful in some areas. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'll say one thing and then I'll pass it to Henry. But we were talking about fear-based, right? Fear-based living. So within the masculine feminine energy, there's love-based and then there's fear-based. And one of my favorite quotes that Henry says is that our weaknesses are our strengths with fear attached to them. And so it's very similar in like within the masculine feminine dynamic. If you're operating in fear, then we're going to, that's when we're going to feel unsafe. We're going to be dysregulated. Yeah. And within relationship, one of my favorite phrases I think you mentioned earlier about, hey, what do you do if two people don't know how to recognize this? One of our favorite things is regulate, relate, reason. Regulate, relate, and then reason.
Oh, because I love that.
Have you ever tried to reason with a dysregulated person?
Oh, you can't.
Like,
it's impossible.
impossible.
Literally, they don't hear you.
They don't hear you. Yeah. And so it's just, we call it the fear cycle. It's like a whole thing that we could even go through. But, you just go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
The feminine doesn't feel safe. And then the masculine feels controlled and criticized. And then she feels more unsafe. And it just goes back and forth.
Yeah, I would actually love to dive into that because the more and more couples I talk to, the more I'm just like, you guys are stuck in this cycle. And it's both are at fault. But like they can't even recognize what's going on, and it is that like fear cycle. So maybe dive into that for a minute. I love that.
So Dr. Bruce Perry is the Regulate, Relate, Reason. If anybody wants to research that more, it's great with kids too. It's great in relationships, but the fear cycle is legit, right? So for example, imagine you have let's just use Terrin and I as an example. If the feminine feels afraid, or if they're triggered, or if they're in fear just means you feel unsafe. So what's she going to do? She said earlier, she's going to step into your masculine to be a huntress, right? And now you have a hunter-hunter dynamic usually, right? But if she gets in her so if the relationship gets unsafe, she gets more in her masculine. And oh man, you guys, we can do. I'm like, my mind's going like, how deep should we go, man?
Let's go.
This is going to give good context for anybody watching. Let's take a step back to explain something that'll help this equation so much better. So let's give you something really practical, and it's people listening that are in that fear cycle and be like, wait, but I want them to do it first. But just hear us out for a second.
It's like the chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
So Tony Robbins and Alison Armstrong, I believe, had this really beautiful framework where the masculine, if you have the 3 C's, it like damages polarity. The 3 C's are critical, controlling, and criticizing.
And closed off.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Closed off. Sorry. Yeah.
I
said critical twice.
Polarity, so
So
you can
don't
help
criticize them first. Sure. I'm just kidding.
The Gottman Institute, I think, talks about
Oh, do they
those
too?
two.
Cool. Yeah, they're awesome. So they say criticize, closed off, or controlled, right? So the opposite of that, you can just do your math. What do the masculine prefer? Admiration, openness and freedom. Right? But let's just talk about critical, controlled, and closed off. Sorry. Okay. My mind's laughing at 5 things in my head because I'm like, how deep do you want to go?
26 years worth.
I know. Seriously. And then the feminine needs to feel seen, safe, and understood, right? So if the feminine doesn't feel safe or feel seen or feel understood, and by safe, I mean emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally, whatever.
Financially.
What she's probably going to do you think she's going to be more critical or less critical?
Oh, more critical.
More closed off or less closed off?
More closed off.
More controlling or less controlling?
More.
Okay, now you have fear, and she goes, boom, I'm going to go down a little bit, and now I'm more critical or more controlling or more closed off. Boom, what happens to this one?
Keeps going.
Yeah.
Keeps
Fear
dropping.
cycle.
Yeah.
And then the masculine becomes less safe,
Right.
sees her less probably, unless he's present and loving and aware, right? And he can
Which
be
most
in
people are not.
Right. Most people aren't. And so the fear cycle is a real thing. Everybody goes through it. Look, it's not a matter of if you're going to get triggered. It's a matter of when.
Exactly.
But what do you do when you're triggered? Do you have the spirit of reconciliation or just spirit of division running your life? Right. But the reality is, when I feel afraid, my natural reaction is to be like, defend myself, or run, or avoid. Right. But to me, the greatest thing that you could do is learn how to fight, learn how to communicate. Right? And learn when she feels unsafe, it is my job to provide safety for her. And yes, I might need a moment, regulate, relate, and reason. Regulate yourself, And so the cycle is a real thing. And I'm telling you right now, if you're watching this or listening to this, like, you have to do this work. Polarity is, think of a magnet. When you're really polarized, you come together. If your intimacy's off, if you feel disconnected even a little bit, if you don't feel as like passionate with somebody, or you don't feel like, boom, like you guys are like this, your polarity's off and you need to check yourself. Right? In a beautiful way. And I say that with so much love, but the reality is you have to look inward.
Yeah.
Right? And it's, I understand this. Like, it's always like, oh, but I want the other person to make me feel safe. Well, I want her to stop criticizing me.
Right. Yeah.
Who's going to step up?
Right.
Are you both going to be able to have this conversation? Then find a third party, get in front of them and do the work, because most likely you're both just hurt. Mm-hmm. You're both just scared, you know? And so the fear cycle is real. And unless you understand how to manage your fears, and which you will have, unless you understand how to navigate polarity, you understand your own masculine feminine dynamic. I understand hers, right? I'm with a very polarized person, integrated wise. She does like $58 million in sales, right? She goes in with CEOs of publicly traded companies, and at the same time, she's this beautiful, nurturing mother. And in our relationship,
you're amazing.
So there's this like dynamic. But to me, learning to appreciate her dynamic and my dynamic is key, right? Because there are moments where I'm extremely, you know, compassionate and nurturing and this, and there are moments where I'm like, probably right now you can feel my energy getting crazy for a second, where I'm just like, no, we have to step forward and get things done and do it. And as business women too, everybody sitting here is business people, you have to get into your huntress, your masculine, to go get stuff done.
Right. To
Right?
make decisions.
Which is a superpower.
To
Yeah.
lead.
It's a logical.
Doing decisions, doing. But what's your core, what's your leading energy? That's a whole conversation. But back to the fear cycle, I understand her strength. When she gets into huntress, she could be a badass huntress, right? And I understand that I married someone that's a very powerful soul, and that's beautiful for me. And if I'm intimidated by that, I have my own work to do.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Yeah.
And for her, she's very conscious. If she sees me where I'll come home one day and I'm like, babe, I need to take my armor off. I've been at war all day.
Yeah.
And she can come in and she just turns on her little sweet nurturing energy and like sees me for who I really am, not where I'm necessarily at.
Yeah.
That gives me the freedom to be like, man. And at the same time, like I'll say this on this podcast, I won't use the same exact word that I use, but I will say a similar
I know
word.
what you're going to say.
So Terrin's going to this meeting and there's like strong personalities, you know, I'm waiting for her in the car. She's like, it's only gonna be 30 minutes. So I have my iPad, I'm working in the car. It's like remote Egypt area, who knows where it is. And so she's about to go into this meeting and I know they're like strong board members, multi-billion dollar company, like, and she's going in there and, you know, I want her to be in her masculine. She has to go in and present and be an authoritative figure to say, hey, I'm gonna help lead you. So she's leaving and then she's about to close the door and I said, hey, should I get colorful or should I just...
get colorful.
Yeah,
You're good.
get
So I don't
Okay.
normally say colorful words, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm going to say it for this podcast. So if
Sometimes
there are kids
there's-
around,
I like
cover
this
their
one,
ears. I looked at her and I said, babe, I hope you have the biggest dick in the room. You know? And I only said that because I want her to go in and not feel intimidated by these guys where some of them are toxic masculinity. They find significance in their title.
Right.
Right? Where I want her to feel safe and secure, but she has such a dynamic with her masculine feminine. Even when she's having lunch with people, like you can tell them your story of like when you're having lunch, like the difference.
Yeah, well, because the integration of the masculine feminine within yourself is so important. And it's really like even in business, like that's what women don't understand is it's being taught a lot of, oh, you're too masculine or oh, you're too feminine, where it's no, it's your masculine and feminine and to be both. So when I actually have gone to lunch with people and I can sense and feel into, is this a masculine man or masculine energy, because it's gender neutral, or if it's a feminine woman. So if I'm taking, you know, a feminine woman to lunch, for example, I'll say, oh, I'd love to take you to lunch. Lunch is on me, right? So I would be paying. But if I'm going to lunch with a masculine man, I actually say, oh, I'd love to go to lunch. Lunch is on my company.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, and it's not like manipulation or anything. It's just I being sensitive to the masculine energy.
Right.
It actually agitates a truly masculine man because he's a provider. He's the safety. He's the certainty. And so to me being the feminine woman that I am, it's just really interesting. And that just comes from my own experience of when I've done that in the past. And even going into these boardrooms, he has the best smile, doesn't he?
Yes, and his
I
new
get
haircut
distracted.
looks fabulous.
Right? They're holding hands underneath the table. I just need everybody to know that.
He's the best. But even going into these, board meetings and in work, it's you can operate in the logic of the masculine, and you can use the intuition and softness of your feminine. Maybe it's like hiring or firing someone that doesn't feel quite right within your gut. Like that's where the feminine and the beauty of the feminine and the wisdom of within your body can tell you and help guide you in that. And it complements these meetings, like going in, if I'm going to go in with ultra masculine energy and it's all masculine energy in there, we just talked about a hunter doesn't go after a hunter.
Right.
So you're still creating polarized relationships within, non-romantic ones. So I can complement that business relationship even being in my feminine because it's not weakness. Being in your feminine is not weak. It's actually a superpower.
It is very superpowers. But I've seen that in my own career where because I experienced this and I didn't even really know what I was doing at the time. But when I was younger, I was a pushover, like just people pleaser. And as I started building my career, I was like, okay, I have to like just be more assertive. Like, and I call it my bitchy phase for about 2 years where I think I went way too much into my masculine. And I remember just like having that loving awareness with myself being like, this isn't me. Like, this just doesn't feel good to me. I'm just innately a kinder, nicer, more loving person. And so I was able to merge that, but with the assertiveness that I learned, be able to kind of merge. And I didn't even know at the time, like, masculine and feminine, but I realized now that I had stepped way too much into my masculine. It wasn't my, like, authentic self. Yeah. So then I went back into my feminine, more so, but like the assertive side of that. And so being in your feminine, especially in the business world, is so powerful, like extremely powerful if you can make sure to put boundaries in place and have that assertive side where it's like, okay, you love me, I love you, but you also can't cross me. Yeah. And so, and then people respect you, I think, more so. Yeah.
Bitch, don't cross me.
In a loving way, of course. So no, I love that example though of lunch. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane.
Thank you.
And there's so much we could dive into. And I think if you just use a metaphor, you can literally shift from moment to moment. And I think that's the trick, is a full integration, right? What's needed at that moment. It's not all or nothing as well, right? We have a blend. It's like, if you want to think of it as like a piano key, right? Some people only live in their masculine or only live in their feminine, they run toxic, fear-based masculinity. There's archetypes to these. You guys, there's so much depth we can go into. But if you think about a piano, the most beautiful thing is you play the chords that's needed at the time. But if I don't have access to these particular notes, I can't play the most beautiful song. You'll play the same, you'll be able to play good music, but there's something missing from your ability to really maximize your life. And so if we can have a clear understanding of where we are on the spectrum, for example, I had a very bad taste of masculinity. My father, bless his heart, good man, operated in fear a lot of his life. I saw things thrown across the room. I saw things that were glass broken, like once a month, right? Like for a while. And so my mind was like, ooh, I don't think masculinity is safe. So I became passive. I became a pleaser. You can please out of fear. You could please out of love. I pleased out of fear. Yeah. When you please out of fear, your other half does not feel safe and you're not really masculine.
So you went into your feminine.
Yeah, I swam for my feminine. And whenever I wanted to go to masculine, it was like this like fake, like, yeah.
I'm a bro.
Right, but deep inside, you're like, it doesn't feel authentic to everything I am. So I had to heal wounds. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not just like, I'm going to be more masculine. Yeah, go do things. Go lift weights. Go put yourself under pressure. Do those things. And let's just be honest. Where are you at? What is your perception? What is your belief system? And the feminine, like, Terrin's been through an abusive, relationship in her past. So naturally, of course, she's going to have certain things that come up for her that put her as a protecting herself. And that's okay, right? Giving yourself the grace and compassion of where you're at. And also just understanding your past is a very big thing to do. Your trauma, your things like that have a very big thing to do with what you really operate in. And Terrin has this beautiful framework. Terrin trained under one of the best trauma experts in the world. He was her mentor all last year, and she's certified under him. And Terrin created this framework on her own, actually, after all of this, but it was identify, heal, integrate, And you do need all three. You need to have that loving identification, the healing process, or releasing from the past process of the traumas, of the belief systems, of the things like that. And then you integrate and embody all aspects of the feminine, including the huntress and, you know, all the sides. And there's archetypes, there's a ton of stuff. Terrin has the Queen Collective. You guys can, if you're interested in the feminine, you guys can go check it out.
Definitely go follow the Queen Collective.
I think it's really important to understand that, like, for example, I wouldn't go for the kill in a lot of things because masculinity at a certain level to me meant danger, separation from those I love, lack of safety, lack of connection. And on a nervous system level, the number one thing I want to feel is safe. The number two and number one thing I want to feel is connection. So understanding that whenever my father was in his masculine, even though I didn't know it wasn't masculine, right? Because what we learn is man, masculine, feminine, women, right?
Right, yeah.
No, there's everything. That belief system had me stuck in a sense, but I had to be honest with myself in that moment and provide that safety. And so back to the keys, I had blocked the bass notes. I had blocked some notes that wouldn't have provided this beautiful, safer relationship. You know, if you ask Terrin, what's one of the first things, we didn't plan this, what's one of the first things I told you when we started dating?
That if we would have met 2 months earlier, he would have ruined it.
No way. Why?
I had patterns.
Really?
I didn't know about. You guys, I'm obsessed with this work. Like, there's nothing greater than the work and investment you put on yourself.
I
Period.
agree.
Yes.
I
Hands
agree
down.
completely.
I remember that previous month for me, I was like, no, I'm going to comb through every part of myself to see what I'm carrying from my last relationships, what I'm carrying from my parents, what I'm carrying, my belief systems, my traumas, my programming, whatever that is. I went on a freaking Henry Ammar dissect yourself spree.
That's amazing, though. I honestly think everyone should do that.
The best thing you'll ever do, because the common denominator in everything you do is you. And if you enhance, everything enhances with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not comfortable sometimes,
No.
you know?
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, they're like, isn't it hard? I'm like, it's harder living stuck.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
take us through the work. So 2 months prior, what were you doing to get out of those patterns?
I went through a deep awareness process of like,
Because I'm trying to go through a deep awareness process.
like, let me be honest, lovingly honest with myself.
Yeah.
What are all the patterns? I went through my relationships. I went through my belief system. I had studied the masculine and feminine at that point. I was like, what parts of you are truly resistant? Where do you feel resistance? Because that'll direct you.
Oh wow.
You know?
That's the question.
Yeah. Where do you feel emotion? What are your behavioral patterns? What are your relational patterns? If you're in a relationship, what do you keep doing? Because I guarantee you probably play the same play over and over again, just put different lipstick on it.
Yeah. Well, and I've noticed too, if you're constantly around people where you're, because I hear this a lot where people are like, oh, I work with all these stupid people or all these dumb people, or I'm always the one who's like doing more in a relationship. And it's like, well, what are you doing to attract that and to create that pattern within that relationship? Because my guess is you're probably not putting up boundaries. You're, and
Or
so
you want control because if you feel safer with certainty than uncertainty.
exactly.
Yeah, and one thing that I actually say is you hear that a lot of, oh my gosh, I've had 7 terrible relationships, where in reality, they've actually had the same relationship 7 times.
Yeah.
Just with different people.
And probably with
And
friendships too. Like you're gonna have those patterns that show up.
And like, do the freaking work, man. Like, if you're in a relationship right now, let's just be honest. Like, what are you running? Do you feel at peace? Do you feel happy? If not, it's possible to do it. Right? Like, that's the thing with this is like, man, I think people just don't have to, like, where do I start?
That's
know?
absolutely.
And there are programs, right? There are programs, whether it doesn't even have to be our programs.
It does have to be theirs. We'll leave a link.
Yeah.
But it doesn't even have to be our programs. There's so much information. There are amazing podcasts. Like, I still go back and listen to my episode with Allison Armstrong, who is a feminine.
She's so good.
She's awesome.
She is
episode
amazing.
was so good.
And that episode, like, she's saying things in the episode, and you see me, I'm like fanboying the whole time. I'm like, dude, I freaking,
She's amazing.
What was that? And like, it's so fascinating. But for me, it's like, you guys, there's hope. Just because something's been a certain way doesn't mean that's how it always needs to be. And I the work that I did that month, the hard work pays dividends forever. Right? You could pay now and play later. You could play now and pay later, right? I think you're supposed to play and pay now personally, because play,
Is part of
as
it.
Mastin says, is the biochemical opposite of trauma, right? Mastin Kipp is awesome. And so I'll just say this, because I'm sure there are people listening right now that are like, if they're males, they're like, am I in my masculine? Am I in my feminine? You could always be more in your masculine. You could always learn how to operate in your feminine. You could always learn how to integrate. There are a lot of women or feminine core energy, people that may be listening. They're like, man, I am controlling. I don't like uncertainty. Nobody does.
Yeah.
Nobody does. Right? And the reality is, I don't know anybody that's fully integrated and embodied both. Right? We're still a work in progress, and we study the hell out of this.
Right.
And yet we still grow. We're still like, hey, like today we had a conversation. I was like, there's a phrase that pre-framing is easier than reframing. Where if you say something beforehand, before it happens, it's way easier than reframing it when it happens.
Right. Yeah.
So true.
Right? So we had a conversation today about our family. We're like, hey, I think things just work better when we pre-frame what we expect that day or what we need, or pre-frame situations. And then that way we're not in the middle of like the dysregulation. We're like, oh yeah, this is that situation. But we're constantly learning, applying, and growing. So my main thing is just take the next simple step to understand yourself. It's the next simple step. It's like driving a car. The light is 5 feet in front of you. Drive into that light, and the next part will light up for you. Just keep going.
Yeah.
Right? But put in the freaking work.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just live in this kind of autopilot zone where they're comfortable, like you said at the beginning, and so just like taking a little step out of that autopilot and that loving self-awareness of just looking at like, okay, how am I behaving? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Why, when we got into this fight, what was I really, like, what was the underlying cause, right? Because I think a lot of times when people say, oh, my wife or my husband just overreacted, it's like, well, but like, yes, maybe they did, but that was the cherry on top. And it was about this whole past thing of them feeling scared. And when you said that certain thing or did that certain thing. And so I think a lot of it is understanding ourselves, but then also trying to understand our partner too, of
100%.
What triggers them, and how can you just help them navigate things better too.
I love that you said that, because that's one of the things that we love is teaching, is understanding each other's triggers within a relationship and communicating it.
Yeah.
And also Henry alluded to the learning how to fight. Actually, on our honeymoon, we sat down, we're like, we're going to learn how to fight.
Not that fun honeymoon activity.
I know. Well, actually what's really interesting, so our very first date, when I came to Utah to see Henry, our very first date was a trauma seminar, 3-day trauma healing seminar.
That is
and
awesome.
Henry was like, this is either going to go really good or it's going to go
She's
really
like,
bad.
I'm coming. I was like, I signed up for this event. It's trauma, man. It's deep. We're either going to work or we're going to not.
That's a great first date, though.
I
That
know.
like forced you to get to know each other really well.
It did, and it was amazing. Yeah, it was awesome. And so then we get engaged, and then we go to Tony Robbins, and then we get married, and then we do a whole bunch of other like seminars and stuff. But on our honeymoon, we were like, okay, we're gonna learn how to fight. And so we just had a loving conversation. And the one thing about the masculine is that I always say the number one tool in a masculine man's tool belt is awareness. And Henry's so aware of not only himself, but of me. And I consider myself fairly self-aware. But he can recognize when I'm triggered sometimes even more so than when I can. Because sometimes when we're in it, and that's the feminine, that's the chaos of the emotion, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like the feminine is that. We're supposed to feel emotion and it's, express it. And actually, even within men, like the truly, like most masculine men are the ones who embrace their feminine. And
What does that mean?
meaning that they allow themselves to feel emotion. We talked about a masculine man, he's out there fighting the war. He's out there trying to provide. He's the warrior. He comes home and he just wants to take off his armor. And that's what a true queen does for her king, is she allows him to take off that armor to just, I just need to be for a second and feel.
Yeah.
And that is more of a feminine energy. so then he can put that armor back on and go out into the world.
And that's what you teach a lot about with the Queen Collective, right? Let's do a little Queen Collective.
Can I say one thing to that really fast?
This is really important.
This is because a lot of men are going to be like, well, what do you mean I'm just going to sit in my emotions?
Yeah.
No, that's not what it is. It's understanding yourself.
Yeah.
Right? It's self-awareness. Because a lot of people, we say awareness because they're like, take off my armor. When I take off my armor, I'm not like, I'm just going to sit here and waddle. It's like, yeah, that's fine. If I feel, I want to feel. But I have to be, it's an opportunity for me to be secure enough with myself to be honest with myself.
Yeah.
Because there are men that feel a lot deeper than other men, right? And so I want to just emphasize that because some people are like, well, what does it mean to embrace your feminine? It's like, oh, I'm just going to sit home and feel, right? I could hear some men saying that, right?
Well, yeah, and a lot of men, I'm not feminine. Yeah,
but it's like the reality is, if you could hold a strong enough structure within yourself to hold space, then you could hold a strong enough structure for other people, right? But because, as Terrin said, whatever you stuff down, you're going to burn out. You're going to have uncomfortable bodily reactions. And there's a lot of emotional override in men. Yeah, push. It's like, you know what? That's going to come back and kick you in the ass. You know? If you're safe enough and secure enough to say, oh, this is what I'm experiencing, without getting caught up in the emotion, right? That you can hold space for yourself too, right? Holding space is such an important part of the masculine. And if I'm not secure enough to be honest with myself, then how am I supposed to be secure for other people?
You can't.
You know?
Yeah.
I just have to say that because a lot of people might say, oh, well, you just I'll take my arm off and feel, just sit there. Yeah, sometimes I'm like, I need some minutes, man. I'm chilling. I'm going to chill on the bed. That's what I'm going to do. You know? And then some days I'm like, man, I want to talk through something. And I preface it.
Yeah.
You know?
He's so good at just that communication.
And with Terrin, like, for example, this is just a little pointer, right? If Terrin's in her masculine, I know her core essence is feminine. And she could lead with her masculine, lead with her feminine. But if she's in her masculine, and I'm not sure if she's in work mode, I don't care. But if she's not in work mode, that means something is making her feel unsafe. So I want to know what that is. And so sometimes I'll go up to her and be like, hey, babe, are you working or in work mode or are you not? And she'll be like, I'm in work mode. I'm like, cool, just checking. And if she's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, oh, what's up? What's on your mind? Like, what do you need? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it's one or the other. And so awareness is so beautiful where like you get to be a provider of that safety for you get to, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think a big thing for the other person to understand too is to not take it personally, right? So if Terrin is in her masculine and you're like, well, what the heck? She's not being touchy to me. Like, she's not touching me. That must mean there's something wrong with me. But no, like understanding, okay, she's probably triggered. She's feeling unsafe. How can I help her? Because a lot of times I think people instantly get defensive of like, well, you're not being this for me. So now I can't be this for you. And it just, that's like where the cycle comes in. And so like in a especially conscious, polarized relationship, being able to have that self-awareness, but then also the other person not taking it personally. So like the non-judgment and
great call out.
Yeah, it's like we're for each other, man. We're on the same team.
Yeah.
Like I'm not fighting you. We're on the same team. Like we want to, Terrin and my objective and goal hopefully is to go from a fear-based life and fear-based relationship to living in a love-based life and a love-based relationship. And if we can keep that as a center and keep that, I'm not saying we're perfect, you guys, like legit, like we have our moments. It's just like, what do you do in those moments?
Yeah.
You know, and new level, new devil, right? Like you're always going to grow. If you stop growing, it's like part of our excitement is we get to grow together.
Yeah.
So I just want to share that. So back to the Queen Collective. Back to you, Bob.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't want to take it away. I'm so sorry.
I just feel like I want to
that
send
was amazing.
everyone to them.
Yes.
Aww.
Like, no, everyone I talk to, I'm like, no, seriously, you guys need this. Like, go look at that course. So, I mean, it affects every aspect of our life.
It does.
Every single one. And I know that you mentioned burnout too. Like, I know for me, when I was deep into my career, I would hit burnout every single year. I would hit this point where I was just like, and it was because I would just shove all my emotions underneath the rug, and I was so good at pushing through, too good at pushing through, that it was I didn't operate enough in the loving feminine, like let's just go out and dance type, you know.
Yeah. Well, a woman in her like if you're feminine at your core, you're not built to operate in your masculine constantly. Like that is what leads to burnout, and that's what's really beautiful is once you can just soften into the feminine, it honestly is the greatest gift that's been given to me. And it's helped, I mean, it's created and given me the greatest blessing. I'll probably cry, guys. In my life, in this man coming into my life, you know, especially after so much hardship. And I cried so many tears of sadness. And now I get to cry so many tears of happiness because of having and experiencing what a truly passionate, connected, polarized relationship is. And it is the most beautiful gift. And
that's going to make me cry.
Yeah.
That's adorable. Do you guys do couples retreats?
We've done a couple.
We're going to. We're going to do in September, but we're moved it to 2024 or the end of this year. So
Okay.
we'll do something.
Let us know. We'll have you on again.
Yeah,
because
because
I think so many people.
What
would
are
benefit.
the ways that people can work with you? So if you could outline
Well, for
that.
me, well, so Instagram's the best for me, which is at the Queen Collective
The
with
Queen
a K.
Collective.
The Queen Collective, where we just talk all about the masculine feminine dynamic
You have
and really
so many good. I mean, even just like the little slides that you share.
Thank
I'm like,
you.
oh, that literally describes exactly what I was feeling, thinking, what I needed. And then the next day it's like, oh no, that's what I needed. There's so many
You're
good
so sweet.
pearls in
Thank
there.
you.
Yeah.
No, and it's all what I love is it's all trauma informed. So it's not just this information that's putting out. It's really impactful things that I've experienced that we've studied, and it's trauma informed and a trauma aspect to it. So we're just trying to help women embody and embrace their true feminine self in all areas, because it's not just, I mean, it's emotion, it's also your sensual, sexual side, and expressing yourself and opening yourself to that and calling in all the beautiful things in life. So anyway, that's the Queen Collective with a K. And then
It's so good. She's doing so many good things. So many good things are coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know when
And
this
I
is.
do want to say, you said trauma informed. I think a lot of times when people think of trauma, they're like, oh, I don't have trauma. Like I didn't go through these like big things.
Everybody has.
But
trauma.
every single
everybody
person does have, I mean, there's a lady I follow, Gabby Bernstein. She talks about little T trauma and big T trauma. And we all have at least that little T trauma of just these stories that we've created. And so I think literally when Terrin says trauma informed, everyone can benefit from that.
Yeah.
You want to, because it just means that it's an understanding of your nervous system, an understanding of how we operate a lot of deeper, more compassionate level than not, right? Because I think honestly, a lot of coaching is just like behavioral based.
Yeah.
Push harder or do this
Like
and do this.
90%
But
of
unless you
coaching is
understand
that,
the nervous system and why and how and compassionate curiosity and all that other stuff, like unless you could have that understanding, to me, real change happens when you have a trauma-informed foundation versus not. And I think that's what's changing in the world right now, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah. Well, you have to learn to identify them too, which that goes self-awareness, writing it down. I love that you said you wrote down all of your patterns. I think that's where it starts. If people are like, okay, well, what do I do? That's where it starts.
Yeah.
Truly. And then do the same thing, but for your significant other, your friend, or whatever it is, to actually start doing the work.
It takes two, especially in a relationship. If one
Yeah.
person's doing the work, that's
hard.
hard. It's really hard.
So how do you get your significant other to do the work if you're the one that's interested in it, but they are not?
Whole
Well,
episode.
I'll say that's a whole episode. The one thing I will say from a feminine woman's,
I literally got a message about that this morning. Someone's like, so my husband, I was like, all right.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, just from a feminine woman's perspective, is you cannot make, you cannot force, you cannot change a masculine man in anything. But what you can do is you can invite and inspire. The more embodied you are in your feminine, the more you're doing the work, is the inspiration to get them into it. But you need to be more masculine and critical, like being criticizing and controlling it. That's not going to invite them into that space. You know,
have to be invited.
You have to invite and inspire them into that.
Yeah.
So
Terrin
that's my
will
one.
so
bit,
lovingly be like, babe, it's so hot when you do this thing. And I'm like,
best.
well,
Your wording is everything.
looks
That
like,
is
true.
looks like I need to do this more.
Yeah, no, it's like if you just use words like "I love it when you do this" or "It's so sexy when you do this," that to the masculine is like changes. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's just, I mean, that's general communication with everyone too, right? Of like, the more that we compliment people and say, I believe in you, like I hold you here, they want to live up to that.
Yeah.
And so that's especially critical with
It
masculine.
takes consciousness, because the natural mind will always go to worst case scenario on fear-based thinking, right? We're going to look for the worst because our number one directive for your subconscious mind is safety.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not going to walk around looking for all the positive things. My mind is looking for all the things that are not right because that's what's not going to keep me safe.
Right.
So default will go worst case scenario. If you let go of the control of a plane, what's going to happen? It's going to crash. Right. You have to maintain consciousness and intention every day. And a lot of us run patterns, you know, it's just a matter of doing that. So, you know, as we wrap up, there are certain ways you could have big breakthroughs a lot quicker, right? And you just have to go through the process, understand trauma, understand the processes of actual breakthroughs, you know, and I think it's powerful.
And just give yourself grace in doing it.
Lots of grace.
What would be like 3 key takeaways the audience can have today, whether it's a book, podcast, your guys' podcast? What's some educational material we can leave them with?
Ooh.
Follow the Queen Collective.
Follow the Queen Collective.
Follow
Henry Ammar.
Henry Ammar. Henry also has a podcast, and it is phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
It is very good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I am genuine. I don't say this like lightly. I love watching Terrin do her thing because she really does take it's a unique approach. You know, she just had an event that I got to sit in on. And this lady was like, dude, I've studied so much masculine and feminine. She goes, I've never seen anybody take this approach.
Wow.
And she's like, dude, I'm riding with you for life.
Yeah,
you know,
beautiful.
because Terrin gave her this massive breakthrough. She's like, no one's ever said it that way. Yeah. I love what she's doing with the Queen Collective, and she's creating some stuff right now. I don't know when this is going to come out, but it's going to change people's lives 100%.
We can't wait.
So I'm excited to witness that.
Yeah.
Like genuinely, like she'll be like, babe, look what someone wrote me in my DMs. I'm like, dude, that's huge.
Yeah.
You know, that's like life-saving stuff, you know? That's an awesome resource. Other resources, other people that you could just study for in terms of trauma in addition to us. Love Gabor Mate, Alison Armstrong's great. Mastin Kipp is great. Jake Woodard has a lot of masculine and feminine. Look, I have to say a disclaimer. I love all these people, but there are things that sometimes I'm like, you know, I think you could add a little bit more of a trauma-informed approach for some of the masculine and feminine. I think some of them get it right, but I think there's golden nuggets with a lot of people out there. You know, I just think take the next simple step. You know?
And a big thing too, it sounds like, is when we are looking at awareness of our intention behind things. Is it love-based or is it fear-based? And so anytime you do find yourself acting a certain way, maybe just starting with asking yourself that question of, what is my intention behind this?
Yep.
Yeah, and honestly, be graceful, because I guarantee you 99.99% of the people woke up in a fear-based state.
Yeah.
Or are operating in a fear-based state like we do. We just have to catch ourselves and be aware and live life awake versus autopilot, right? Don't sleepwalk through life, because sleepwalking is going to be fear-based. But man, life is too short to just be a puppet, man.
Do you do something in the mornings that kind of helps you put yourself into that state?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know you guys are trying to wrap up this podcast, but we're like, let's the extended version.
Just really quickly.
Really quickly.
I have my morning routine. She has hers. They're a little different. Mine's probably more of a masculine approach, to be honest. I wake up, I pray. God is my guide. Jesus, love Jesus. But, you know, connect to whatever it is that you do, right? Meditate, pray. I read. And then I write my intention
for the day.
How I'm going to show up, what's going on, you know, how I want to show up as a husband, as a father, in my business. And I use like I am statements. And here's a tip. The more emotional you make this intention, the more it embeds into your system. That's a whole thing we could talk about. And then the second thing is I write 3 specific outcomes and why and how I want to show up for them that day. At the end of this day, what will make this successful? What will make this day successful? I write them down. And then I actually have an accountability buddy. We're doing 90 days straight. We're texting each other day 1, day 2. And then when one of us slips, we start over day 1.
Wow.
Until we go 90 days straight. And then at night, I check in. I'll look at my list and be like, how was I today?
Yeah.
In a loving awareness state. Be like, dude, you totally dropped the ball on that thing. But you did good on that one. So why? Because if I could incrementally get better every single day, then, dude, listen, like, that's the best part about life.
Yeah.
You know,
Progress.
that's my routine.
I love that.
It's perfect.
Mine's much more of a feminine approach, because you know the masculine is structured and like checklist. And Well, I'm much more slow and into feeling, and in the morning, to me, gratitude, starting your day with gratitude is
For sure. Yeah.
is the best way to start it. And so I also like my prayers, my personal prayers are very important. And mine is also like a routine throughout the day. It's not even a specific just in the morning, sorry. Because I can get caught up in the doing. I actually have little reminders in my phone. I use my phone as my little masculine presence of like, here's your reminder. But it's just a reminder that pops up that says pause, breathe, and be still. And it reminds me just to, I can like soften for a second and really like tuning into my intuition and what message am I supposed to receive for that day. Because everything, that even what I'm doing with the Queen Collective is whatever your audience believes in, whether it's universe or God or Buddha or whatever, I believe in God. I'm just very much in the space of I want to make this what my higher power needs it to be, not what I want it to be. And that's how I want to live life and how I want to move forward. And so just trying to stay connected in that way. And
I love that.
And so that's more of mine.
Those are perfect.
That's
That was a good wrap up.
That was perfect. Yeah. It gives people some ideas of kind of how to
The
implement
7
it.
steps to, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
We have so many more
I
questions,
know.
but yes, we will leave it at that.
Thank you guys so much.
for having us.
I am going to even go back and re-listen to this because I have key takeaways.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that accountability thing with Nikki. I'm going to make you do it.
Yes.
90 days.
I'm in. And
90
I'm excited
days.
for the new courses and stuff that you're coming out with, Terrin. I think that will be
That's
great
fire,
to
guys.
share with the audience. So
Thank you. Yeah, we're so excited.
Okay, well, you guys are amazing. We love you both. So grateful.
Love you. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Building with Vitality.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more.
Love you guys.